Disclaimer: this content is intended for mature audiences only. Viewer discretion is advised. She never imagined that something as simple as paying the rent could turn her life upside down. On the surface, Emily's life seemed ordinary, working long hours at a small coffee shop, juggling bills, and trying to keep a roof over her head in a city where everything always seemed just a little out of reach. But that night, when she knocked on a stranger's door to settle her landlord's overdue payment, she stepped into a world she had never intended to enter. Have you ever wondered what it feels like when a small decision, one that seems harmless, spirals into something that changes everything? Emily wasn't reckless. She was careful, responsible, the kind of person people counted on. But there was something magnetic about the man who answered that door, Jason. Calm, polite, and strangely charming, he made her feel at ease in a way she hadn't felt in months. His apartment was warm, almost inviting, a stark contrast to the chilly tension of the city streets outside. And yet, there was something beneath his surface, a flicker in his eyes, that hinted at trouble she couldn't quite name. It started innocently. A conversation about rent turned into a shared cup of coffee, which turned into laughter and small confessions late into the night. Emily couldn't ignore the way her heart raced when he smiled, or the way her thoughts lingered on him long after she left. She told herself it was harmless, just human connection, but deep down, she knew she was stepping into territory she hadn't meant to explore. Have you ever found yourself drawn to someone, even when every logical part of you knows you shouldn't be? What happens when desire starts to blur the line between right and wrong? That's exactly the tension Emily faced, and it's a question every one of us has wrestled with at some point. As the night stretched on, little choices began stacking into moments that felt larger than life. A touch lingered too long, a glance held a secret meaning, and the air between them charged with something both thrilling and forbidden. Emily's mind raced with what-ifs, and for the first time in a long while, she felt alive, but also terrified of what she might be opening herself up to. By the end of that evening, Emily had made a decision she couldn't take back. But the consequences? They were still waiting, hidden just beyond the threshold. What would happen when the simple act of paying the rent became a catalyst for desire, temptation, and a secret that could unravel everything she thought she knew? Emily couldn't stop thinking about that night. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw Jason's calm smile, the way his eyes seemed to notice the smallest details about her, and how easy it felt to talk to him, like she had known him far longer than a single evening. Yet, alongside that warmth, there was an undercurrent of unease. Something about the way he lingered at the doorway, watching her leave, left a shiver she couldn't quite explain. She told herself it was just curiosity, nothing more, but her heart whispered a different story. Her days at the coffee shop suddenly felt slower, each task repetitive and dull compared to the spark of that unexpected connection. She found herself glancing at her phone, wondering if she might hear from him, debating whether it would be appropriate, or even safe, to reach out. Emily wasn't used to uncertainty. She liked control and predictability, but the thought of Jason broke all of that. There was an allure to the unknown that made her pulse quicken, and every moment she spent imagining their next encounter felt both thrilling and slightly dangerous. Jason, meanwhile, seemed equally enigmatic. When she saw him in passing that week at the corner store or walking through the neighborhood, he always offered a casual wave, a small acknowledgement, yet he never lingered long enough to let the conversation deepen. It was as if he was testing her, letting the tension build, drawing her in without revealing too much. Emily started noticing details she had missed before, the subtle lines around his eyes when he smiled, the faint fragrance that lingered in the air after he left, even the way his voice carried a quiet confidence that made her feel both safe and exposed. At the same time, Emily's life was complicated in other ways. Rent was always tight, bills were piling up, and her friends had their own dramas that didn't leave much room for her to escape. But Jason's presence introduced a distraction she hadn't anticipated, a private world where laughter felt easy and attention felt meaningful. She couldn't help but wonder, did he see her the same way, or was she just a fleeting curiosity in a life she didn't fully understand? One evening, as she walked past his apartment, the door opened slightly before she could even knock. Jason appeared, as if he had been expecting her. His expression was unreadable, a mix of amusement and something deeper, something Emily couldn't yet name. The brief moment stretched longer than it should have, the silence filled with unspoken questions and possibilities. It was in that suspended second that Emily realized she was no longer just paying rent or exchanging pleasantries. Something more intense was quietly unfolding, a pull she didn't fully understand, and she wasn't sure if she was ready or willing to resist it. As the days went by, Emily began noticing the little signs, a message left on her phone with a simple, "thinking of you," or a subtle gesture, a coat draped over a chair, a smile that lingered longer than necessary. Each moment added weight, building a tension that was impossible to ignore. It was thrilling, intoxicating, and slightly terrifying all at once. Emily couldn't stop replaying their last encounter in her mind, and every little detail seemed to take on new meaning the more she thought about it. Jason's gaze, the casual way he brushed past her to hand her the envelope for the rent, even the faint sound of laughter from his apartment, it all lingered in her memory like a quiet echo she couldn't shake. She found herself imagining conversations that hadn't even happened yet, wondering what it would feel like to be completely honest with him, to let herself show the side of her she rarely shared with anyone. At the same time, life outside Jason's apartment refused to pause. Bills kept arriving, her shifts at the coffee shop stretched longer than usual, and she found herself struggling to balance responsibilities with the growing distraction of this connection she couldn't ignore. Emily started noticing small things she had previously overlooked, the way the city lights reflected in the puddles after rain, the rhythm of footsteps on the pavement, the quiet moments when no one else was around. These details, once mundane, now seemed amplified whenever she thought about Jason, as if the world itself had shifted slightly in response to this new tension in her life. Meanwhile, Jason remained a mystery. Some days he was distant, polite but reserved, almost unreadable. Other times, his subtle gestures, a warm glance, a shared laugh, a comment that hinted at something personal, made her heart race. Emily couldn't tell whether he was deliberately drawing her in, testing her boundaries, or simply unaware of the effect he had on her. The uncertainty became intoxicating, and every interaction seemed layered with possibilities. She began to question her own instincts, wondering if her attraction was something fleeting or if it signaled a deeper connection that neither of them fully understood yet. Adding to the tension, Emily's friends started noticing the changes in her. They teased her gently about the way she seemed distracted, the little smiles that appeared when she checked her phone, and the occasional absent-minded laughter that came out of nowhere. She found herself keeping secrets she had never needed before, carefully navigating conversations to avoid revealing too much. It wasn't that she didn't trust her friends, it was just that this was something she felt she had to experience for herself, even if it meant walking a fine line between caution and desire. Even as Emily tried to maintain balance, questions and doubts crept in. Was she letting herself be vulnerable too quickly? Could she trust the feelings she was developing, or was she being swept up by the excitement of something forbidden? And what about Jason? Was he as intrigued by her as she was by him, or was she imagining the intensity of their connection? These questions created a push and pull she couldn't easily escape, keeping her on edge and unable to ignore the magnetic pull between them. The suspense deepened when one evening, as she approached his door, she noticed a faint light through the blinds and the low hum of music playing. It wasn't just a casual moment anymore. Something was waiting on the other side, something she couldn't quite anticipate. Emily paused, caught between stepping forward and retreating, knowing that whatever happened next could shift everything she thought she understood about herself and him. Emily stood outside Jason's apartment, her hand hovering over the door handle, heart pounding in a rhythm that felt almost loud enough for him to hear. The faint glow of the hallway light seemed too bright, too revealing, and yet the warmth spilling from the apartment called to her, drawing her closer. She could hear the faint clink of dishes from the kitchen, the soft hum of music, and it made her pause, wondering if she was stepping into a casual evening or something far more complicated than she had anticipated. Her thoughts raced as she remembered the past few weeks, the teasing smiles, the lingering touches, the subtle hints that had slowly built a connection impossible to ignore. Each moment with Jason had been like walking a tightrope, exhilarating and dangerous, thrilling and confusing. Emily knew she was standing on the edge of something she couldn't predict, and the anticipation made her both nervous and excited in ways she had never experienced before. Inside, Jason seemed equally aware of the tension. When she finally stepped across the threshold, their eyes met, and the silence stretched long enough for both of them to feel its weight. Words hung unspoken between them, loaded with meaning that neither dared to voice yet. Emily's pulse quickened with the realization that every glance, every subtle gesture, had been building toward this moment, a confrontation of unspoken desires and fears. The apartment felt smaller somehow, intimate in a way that made her aware of every movement, every breath. She noticed the details she hadn't before, the slight smudge of his fingerprints on the glass coffee table, the way the light hit his hair, the faint scent of his cologne lingering in the air. Each observation reminded her that this was no ordinary meeting. Something significant was about to happen, though neither of them knew exactly what form it would take. Emily tried to steady herself, to think logically, but logic had no place here. The tension had been mounting for weeks, a slow-burning fire that now felt like it could ignite at any second. Every question in her mind, about trust, desire, boundaries, circulated with renewed intensity. Should she retreat and protect herself, or take the leap and risk everything? And what about Jason? Was he feeling the same surge of emotions, or had she been imagining the depth of their connection all along? As the music played softly in the background, Jason took a step closer, and Emily felt the world narrow to just the two of them. Their proximity was electrifying, and the silence between them became almost unbearable. The air seemed charged with possibility and danger at once, leaving her breathless and uncertain. Just as Emily felt the electricity between them reach an almost unbearable intensity, a sudden knock on the apartment door shattered the moment. Both of them froze, startled by the intrusion. Emily's heart lurched, not from desire this time, but from the fear that their carefully built tension could unravel in an instant. Jason's brow furrowed, his casual confidence replaced by a flicker of concern. He glanced toward the door, then back at her, and Emily realized that this was a new variable she hadn't anticipated. Jason's voice was low, almost cautious. "I wasn't expecting anyone tonight." His eyes held hers, a mix of apology and curiosity, leaving Emily unsure if she should stay or leave. She took a step back, trying to steady her racing thoughts, and wondered who could be there. The city around them felt suddenly louder, every distant siren and passing footstep echoing like a warning. Jason moved toward the door, his hand hovering over the handle, hesitating for just a second before opening it. A familiar figure stepped inside, one Emily hadn't expected, a woman carrying a large envelope, looking as composed and professional as if nothing unusual had just occurred. Emily's stomach tightened. The woman's presence introduced an entirely new layer of tension, a plot twist that Emily hadn't anticipated, yet it somehow intensified the magnetic pull she felt toward Jason. The woman smiled politely, glancing briefly at Emily before focusing on Jason. "I have something for you," she said, her tone courteous, but carrying a subtle edge. Emily noticed the way Jason's expression shifted, a mix of recognition and unease flickering across his face. This was a side of him she hadn't seen before, and it made her question everything she thought she knew. Emily stepped further into the apartment, trying to stay calm. The dynamic had changed suddenly, the private tension she had been savoring now mixed with a new uncertainty. Questions bombarded her mind. Who was this woman? What did she mean to Jason? And why did her arrival feel like it had the potential to unravel the growing connection between them? Jason accepted the envelope, his hands brushing against hers briefly. The contact sent a jolt through Emily, reminding her that the attraction between them was still very much alive, but now complicated. The woman offered a polite nod and, without another word, left the apartment, leaving behind an air of unresolved tension that made Emily's pulse race. Jason turned back to her, his usual composure slightly cracked. "I didn't expect her tonight," he admitted, running a hand through his hair. His vulnerability was new, raw, and it only made Emily feel more drawn to him, even as uncertainty gnawed at the edges of her excitement. The sudden twist had raised the stakes. What had seemed like a clear path toward connection now felt layered with hidden stories, secrets, and unspoken responsibilities. As Emily looked at him, her mind raced with possibilities. Would she confront him about the unexpected visitor, or let the moment continue to build between them? And how would Jason navigate the tension now that another element had entered the mix? The questions hung in the air, thick with suspense, as the story reached a turning point. Emily's chest felt tight as she watched Jason set the envelope down on the table. The earlier tension, the magnetic pull between them, and the sudden intrusion of the unexpected visitor had built to a point where she wasn't sure whether to confront him or let the moment take its course. Jason finally looked at her, his eyes soft but serious. "Emily, there's something you need to know," he said, his voice low but steady. Her heart skipped a beat. She had been on the edge of understanding him for weeks, and now the truth hung between them like a fragile thread. Jason took a deep breath. "The woman tonight, she's not just delivering something for me. She's my sister." Emily blinked, caught off guard. The explanation was simple, yet it shifted everything she had assumed. She realized how easily her mind had jumped to conclusions, how quickly she had imagined secrets and hidden agendas. Jason's expression showed the weight of responsibility he carried, and the vulnerability in his eyes made Emily feel closer to him than ever before. Her pulse slowed just slightly, replaced by a surge of relief. The tension between them didn't vanish, it transformed. Now it was a shared understanding, a connection strengthened by honesty rather than the thrill of uncertainty. Emily took a step closer. I understand," she whispered, feeling the warmth of his presence, the electric pull that had drawn her in from the very first night. Jason reached for her hand, the gesture deliberate yet tender. "I wanted you to know the truth before anything else happened. I didn't want secrets between us." Emily felt a shiver run down her spine, a mixture of excitement and reassurance. This was the moment she had been anticipating, the resolution of uncertainty, the unveiling of a hidden truth, and the validation that the attraction they shared was real, not imagined. They stood there for a moment, simply looking at each other, the hum of the city outside fading into insignificance. Emily's mind replayed the past weeks, the shared laughter, the lingering touches, the stolen glances, and now she could see them with clarity. The conflict, the fear, the doubts, they all led to this point of raw honesty and emotional connection. Just as she began to relax, a soft buzz interrupted the silence. Jason's phone lit up on the table. He glanced at it, and his expression shifted slightly, an unreadable mix of surprise and concern. Emily leaned in, curious. The message wasn't from his sister or anyone she knew. It was from someone else entirely, someone whose presence she hadn't anticipated. Jason looked at her, eyes wide, and whispered, "I think we're going to need to talk about this, before anything else happens." The story had resolved the main tension between them, but this new twist hinted that their connection, and the challenges it faced, was far from over. Emily's heart raced again, caught between relief, desire, and the sudden thrill of the unknown. Emily and Jason sat together on the small couch, the glow of the city lights spilling through the blinds and casting a warm hue across the room. The tension that had defined the past few weeks had finally eased, replaced by a quiet understanding and a new sense of closeness. Emily reflected on everything that had happened, the uncertainty, the unexpected visitor, and the surge of emotions that had drawn her so deeply into Jason's world. Each challenge had tested her patience, her judgment, and her heart, but now it felt as if those moments had prepared them for this calm, shared space between them. Jason's phone buzzed again, but this time, he set it aside without worry. Whatever the message held, Emily trusted that they could face it together. The earlier shock of potential secrets had reminded them both how fragile trust could be, yet how vital honesty and openness were in building a real connection. Emily smiled, realizing that the fear and suspense of recent events had been replaced by something far more lasting: mutual respect, care, and a shared desire to nurture the bond that had grown between them. They talked quietly for hours, sharing stories about their lives, their dreams, and their fears. Emily discovered sides of Jason she hadn't seen before: the careful thought he put into decisions, the small acts of kindness he rarely showcased, and the way he genuinely listened, making her feel seen and valued. In turn, she opened up about her own struggles, her hopes for the future, and the quiet dreams she had tucked away for too long. By the time the night ended, the room felt lighter, and Emily sensed that the chapter of confusion and tension had closed, leaving space for something real to grow. Even as the story settled, a small spark of curiosity remained about the future. The unexpected messages, the unanticipated twists, they hinted that life would continue to present challenges, but Emily now felt ready to face them. What mattered most was the connection they had built together, a connection rooted in honesty, attraction, and the willingness to navigate uncertainty hand in hand. As she left Jason's apartment, Emily felt a mix of relief, excitement, and anticipation. She knew their story wasn't over, but the way they had handled the conflicts and surprises gave her confidence that whatever came next, they would face it together. And in that moment, Emily understood that love, trust, and human connection were far more powerful than any temporary suspense or fear. How do you feel about Emily and Jason's journey? Would you like to see a sequel exploring what happens next? Share your thoughts in the comments, and let us know how you would handle moments of temptation and uncertainty in your own relationships. Summary: in She Just Wanted to Pay the Rent, but crossed a line true infidelity story, Emily's simple goal to pay her rent leads her into a world of unexpected romance and suspense. As attraction grows, secrets are revealed, tension escalates, and Emily must navigate trust, desire, and the unpredictability of human connection. 48.